Hi guys, it's Marley. Welcome to another Marley Muttering, which is the thing I do without AJ here to keep the wheels on the bus. And so the bus usually goes off the road into the woods and we all stare at the wreckage. And today, the wreckage is me. Or more precisely, a bone deep terror I've had for years that I have no personality, or that I'm a shallow human with no real depth. How that feels like the root of my inability to attract and maintain solid connections with people beyond superficial acquaintanceship, and my recent discovery that this is not actually an uncommon thing for people with neurocomplexity, and why. So let's unpack things a little, shall we? So before I dive into the whys of this happening, I must tell you what this actually looks like. And let's see if any of this sounds familiar to you. Because it's not always big, dramatic meltdown. Sometimes it's just quiet. It's sitting in a car with a friend while they talk about their thing, that passion they've built their entire life, their community, their very soul around. And as I'm listening, I'm nodding, but internally I'm screaming. I'm thinking, I have nothing. There is no thing for me. I feel like a shallow pool of water next to their ocean, and I'm wondering, how is this person even sitting here with me? What are they even looking at? There's no depth for them to dive into. It's those nights where I'm sitting alone and the silence gets too loud, and I find myself genuinely asking, what do real people do for fun? Not ADHD fun, not the 2 a.m. Wikipedia rabbit hole about deep sea squids, but real fun, the kind that comes from a solid sense of self. I feel like I'm looking through a window at a party that I wasn't invited to, and I'm trying to decode the instructions on how to be a human. And then there's the social mirror. The moments where I find myself smiling and nodding, pretending to love a band I've never heard of, or a hobby I actually find exhausting, just so the other person won't leave. It's a survival reflex. I'm so terrified of rejection that I'll become whoever you want me to be, just to keep you in the room. And the saddest part is sometimes I don't even know why I want to be friends with them. I'm not choosing them because I like them. I'm performing so they'll choose me. Because in my head, why would anyone, romantically or otherwise, ever voluntarily pick me as their first choice? How can you pick me when there is no me to pick? You're just picking a reflection of yourself that I'm holding up because I'm too scared to show you the ghost behind the glass. And the weirdest part is that from the outside, you'd never really guess. I've always got a smart ass quip ready, or I'm loud, I go on rants, I laugh, I have a million hobbies. On paper, I look like I have too much personality. I've always thought that because of the ADHD, I should have more self than everyone else. I've got hyperfixations, the impulsivity, the too muchness. Surely that adds up to a person, right? Right? But if you really look at it, it starts to look more like all symptoms and no substance. Like I'm a collection of colourful post-it notes, but there's no ball behind to stick them on. Recently, though, I've been diving into the research trying to make sense of this void in me, and I've discovered something that is both freeing and absolutely terrifying. I'm not alone. This Error 404 of the soul is remarkably common in neurocomplex people, especially those of us in the late diagnosis crowd. It turns out there are actual structural reasons why our brains struggle to build that core self. So let's talk about the why. Why do we feel like we have no identity? Why does it feel like there's no me in the middle of all this madness? Well, the first culprit is the social mirror. See, most people use a mirror to check their hair. We use it to survive because we're so hypersensitive to rejection because we've been told our whole lives that we're too much, too loud, or just too weird. We become professional shapeshifters. When I walk into a room, my brain isn't asking, do I like these people? It's scanning the room like a radar. It's doing a vibe check. What makes them laugh? What do they hate? And then I just become that. I absorb their slang, their hobbies, even their opinions. And I'm not connecting with them, I'm reflecting them so they won't reject me. But here's the kicker: being a mirror is exhausting. It takes up to 99% of your cognitive battery just to keep the reflection steady. There's no power left over to actually ask, wait, do I even like this person? Is this actually me? And when you spend like 20 or 30 years being a mirror, you eventually forget what you look like when the room is empty. You feel shallow because you've trained yourself to only exist on that surface, the surface sphere where other people can see you. You've forgotten that you're allowed to have a shape of your own. In psychology, there's this fancy term called identity diffusion. It's a fancy way of saying that yourself is like a puzzle with half the pieces missing, like it's fragmented and underdeveloped sense of self. Think back to being a teenager. That's when everyone else was finding themselves. But for us, we were too busy finding everyone else. Well, neurotypical kids are exploring their souls. And it is still hard for them as well. It's a period of trying to fit in. We were spending 100% of our brain power just trying to remember our homework, find our keys, and figure out why the hell we felt so broken compared to everyone else. We weren't building a core, we were building a shield. And because of our ADHD symptoms, the impulsivity, the distractibility, the emotional storms, we were always treated as character flaws by the world. We internalized that. We didn't build a positive identity because we were too busy apologizing for existing. We didn't have the luxury of developing a self because we were stuck in a permanent survival mode. So it's not that there's nothing inside you. It's just that space where your personality was supposed to grow was occupied by a massive 24/7 security team dedicated to making sure nobody saw the real you. And unfortunately, nobody included you yourself. Then there's the hyperfixation merry-go-round. So I mentioned earlier that I always thought the ADHD should give me more personality because I'm always into something new. But there's this cruel paradox at play. Our brains latch onto things with terrifying intensity. We become world leading experts on the mating habits of platypuses for exactly 72 hours. We buy books, we watch documentaries, we tell everyone in the grocery store about their venomous spurs, and then the dopamine runs out. Suddenly the platypus is dead to me. Now I'm spending $400 on a professional grade model kits because this is my new calling. I buy the tools, the paints, the magnifying glass, and a week later they're just sitting in a box, gathering dust next to the sourdough bread starter and the unicycle. And on the outside, it looks like passion. It looks like I'm a Renaissance woman with 1,000 interests. But on the inside, it feels like instability. It feels like I'm a series of temporary obsessions in a trench coat. Because our interests are driven by a dopamine chase rather than a soul calling. They feel disposable. And when that dopamine vanishes, we're left standing in a room full of expensive equipment with a hollow feeling in our chest, asking, do I actually care about anything? Or am I just like a human browser with too many tabs open? And this makes connecting with people feel like a minefield. When someone asks those standard getting to know you type questions, what kind of music do you like? What do you do for fun? You're stuck there with a blank stare, and you're thinking, well, this morning I liked 18th century architecture, but by lunch I think I might be a minimalist who hates possessions, so I don't know, pass? To the world, we kind of look flaky, but to us it's deeper than that. Society tells us that personality is built on consistency, on what you love and do year after year. So if we don't have that one true steady passion, we feel like we're missing a core ingredient of being a real person. And once again, all symptoms, no substance. And then we have the two heavy hitters of the ADHD brain: working memory and time blindness. So identity is built on continuity. You know who you are because you can feel the thread connecting you to who you were yesterday, last month, 5 years ago. But for us, we live in an almost permanent now. My sense of self is constantly being erased and reset. I still genuinely feel like the pandemic was 2 years ago. Most of my stories start with a couple of days ago, even when I'm talking about something that happened in 2023. My brain doesn't file things by date, it files them by happening or not happening. To develop a personality, you need a narrative. You need to be able to look back and see a thread that connects past Marley to present Marley. But with ADHD, our working memory is like an etch a sketch. Every time we sleep, or sometimes just when we walk into a new room, the universe shakes the toy and the drawing disappears. Because of time blindness, we don't really let ourselves feel our past selves. We only feel who we are right this second. And how can you have depth of character when you can't consistently access your own history? It's hard to feel like a deep person when your brain keeps losing the files on who you were 6 months ago. You feel shallow because you're perpetually new to yourself. You're not a book with chapters. You're a series of loose pages blowing around in a gale force wind. And then you couple all of that with everyone's favourite, emotional dysregulation. So, for most people, their personality is the anchor that holds them steady during an emotional storm. They have a core that they can retreat to, but for us, the storm is our identity. When we're happy, we aren't just feeling happy, we are the happiest person alive. Every molecule is vibrating, but then when we feel rejected, we aren't just sad, we are an absolute bottomless pit of despair. Because our emotions are so massive and all consuming, they hijack the driver's seat. You start to feel like you don't have a core because your baseline is constantly moving. You ask yourself, am I the funny, high energy person, or am I the quiet, brooding one? And the truth is that we're both. But because the switch happens so fast, it doesn't feel like layers of a personality. It just feels like we're a series of reactions rather than a solid human being. So when you look at the math, it's actually pretty simple. When you combine a brain that can't remember its own history, a brain that can't feel the passage of time, and emotions that hit you like a freight train, of course you're not going to feel like a real person. You're a person whose internal librarian is throwing the books on the floor and losing the index cards. You aren't shallow. You're just living in a library where the lights keep going out and someone is rearranging the shelves while you sleep. Yes, so we've identified the glitch. We know why we're feeling like ghosts haunting our own lives. But how do we actually start existing? How do we stop being a reflection and start being the light? Well, I've done some reading, my friends. I've been digging through the wreckage and I found a handful of ways to try and start recoding the operating system. And yes, I know I'm switching my metaphors all over the place from libraries to computers to ghosts, but you'll recover. My brain is a multiverse, so keep up. To find me in the middle of all this ADHD noise, we have to stop trying to build a personality the way real people do. We have to do it our way. So let's talk about how we start anchoring the ghost. So the first strategy I want to talk about is to start being the author of your own story. So, since our working memory and time blindness make it impossible to feel our personality internally, we have to move it externally. We need to stop trying to keep a mental tally of who we are and what we like and start building like an identity journal. So, bear with me. This is not a to do list. This is an I am list. So, every time you find something that genuinely makes your brain tingle, not because a friend liked it, not because it's trending on TikTok, but because it actually made you feel happy or alive, write it down. I'm going to be trying this one myself. It's about catching those fleeting moments of self before the etch a sketch shakes them away. Now, some other articles that I was reading suggest that for late diagnosis adults, a huge step is reauthoring your past. And that means looking back on your life through the ADHD lens and separating your symptoms from your soul. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not going to be doing that. My working memory is such a mess that I barely remember being a kid. I don't want to spend my limited energy chasing ghosts in a past I can't access. I'd rather put a full stop on the old chapters and figure out who I am from this page going forward. But I'm mentioning it because it might work for you. If you have those memories, go get them. Whether you're looking back or looking forward, it's all about becoming the librarian of your own soul. Your brain isn't using a filing system, so you have to build one on the outside where you can actually see it. The next strategy is a solitude audit. And the idea is simple. You spend time completely alone with no one there to reflect back. No audience, no performance. The theory is that when no one's watching, you'll naturally reach for the things you actually love. You'll find the real you in the quiet. And I'm going to be real with you again. I find this incredibly hard. For me, if I'm left alone in the silence for too long, I don't find a self. I find a void. And when you stare into that void long enough, you start staring back. And the void is pitch black. Instead of discovering like my favorite color, I find my own aloneness, and I start drifting aimlessly until the depression sets in. I've realized lately that I might not actually be an introvert like I thought I was. I think my exhaustion from being around people isn't because I hate them, it's because the masking is a full time job. Performing normal human for 8 hours in a stretch is a marathon. But when I stop performing and go home to the silence, I'm stuck in this brutal catch 22 where I'm lonely and I need connection to feel like a real person. But then the voice in my head starts up. Why would anyone want to spend time with you? Why would anyone pick you for their weekend plans? You don't even know who you are. How is anyone supposed to connect with a ghost? So, the solitude audit feels like a trap for you if being alone makes that error 0404 louder. Know that you aren't failing at self discovery. You might just be like me, someone who needs a safe mirror before they can learn to stand on their own. We aren't broken, we're just social creatures who have been hiding for so long that we've lost our trail. But here's one that actually vibed with me, and that's accepting the multitude. So we have to stop comparing our depth to neurotypical consistency. Society tells us that depth is doing one thing for 20 years, becoming the world's leading expert on, I don't know, Victorian door hinges. They say passion is dedication. But I'm calling bullshit. Depth can also be intensity. Just because our hyperfixations change doesn't mean we're shallow. It means we're polymaths. A polymath's someone whose knowledge spans dozens of different worlds. We are Renaissance people. Our one true passion isn't a hobby, it's curiosity itself. If we can reframe our traits as strengths, as high intensity curiosity, we can finally start building a positive self concept. You aren't an empty shell, you're a kaleidoscope. You're supposed to shift. And every time you shift, the pieces tumble and create dazzling new pattern that nobody has ever seen before. And there's no rule that says you have to be a static, unchanging person with three core interests. If someone asks me what I'm into, I'm learning to say, I'm into the chase. I'm into investigating the world and letting my brain dictate the direction. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you flaky or morally suspect. It just makes you the kind of person who knows an alarming amount of trivia about 18th century architecture, but has absolutely no idea how to plunge a toilet. We need to stop thinking we have to be carbon copy of the people we want to be friends with. Differences are where the strength is. My chaos might be exactly what someone else's order needs to breathe. And I'm rambling again, but you get it. The shift is the point. Now we have to talk about the two terrifying ones. And the first one is learning to be vulnerable. So this is incredibly important, and yet it feels like jumping off a cliff without a parachute, especially for those of us with highly defined RSD. We are so terrified that if we stop performing, people will see the mess and they'll run for the hills. Now, I'm the queen of the rant. I can go on a 15-minute tear about something stupid or frustrating, and it feels like I'm sharing. But here's the truth I'm realizing: ranting isn't vulnerability, ranting is a shield. It's loud and it can be funny and it keeps people at arm's length. It doesn't actually invite anyone in to see your squishy parts. To have deep friendships, you have to risk being boring. You have to risk saying, actually, I'm struggling today. I feel like I don't have a personality. I feel hollow. I feel like a ghost. And we spend so much time trying to be the fun one because we think that's our only value. We try to be like the other person because we think that's the only way that they'll like us. But you have to give people the chance to reject the real you, or they could never really accept you either. And yeah, it's also a bit of a filter. If you tell someone that you love going to pride parades and it turns out they're a raging homophobic, good! The trash took itself out. Why would you want to mask for someone who hates your soul? And this applies to relationships as too. Like, you don't want to be in a relationship with someone who has everything in common with you, and they have everything in common with you because you just tell them what you think they want to hear. You tell them that you like the things they like so that they like you. I'm like literally rubbing my chest right now because the anxiety is spiking just thinking about it. Like, I would suffocate in a relationship where we had to do everything together and had everything in common. I don't need a clone, I need a person. I want to go do X with AJ because you don't like it and AJ does, and AJ's my X person. I want to go to football with someone else. I want my reading time to be my me time. Wow, that was a bit of a tangent, but maybe it was just a deflection because this is getting a bit too real. Who's to say? But the point is this: when you stop the surface level amusement act and you finally give people a chance to connect with what's underneath, you stop being a mirror and start being a human being. And guess what? Ghosts can be interesting. You just have to let people into the haunted house. So now the big one: unmasking. And we hear this term everywhere. The internet tells us the fix for ADHD burnout is to just take off the mask and be ourselves. But when you feel like a ghost like me, that's terrifying. If I take off the mask and there's nothing underneath, then what? So while I was digging into this, I stumbled across a term called neuroqueering. Now I'm still trying to figure this one out. It's a bit of a rabbit hole. There's gender theory and subverting norms in there, but there's a definition that finally made my brain click. And it's that unmasking is a negative. It's a subtraction. It's taking something away. Neuroqueering is a creative rebellion, so it's building on something. So it's about actively building a self that refuses to apologize for existing, subverting the norms. Instead of hiding your stimming under the desk so nobody sees, you just do it. Instead of constantly saying, I'm sorry, I have ADHD, please communicate to me this way, you just communicate the way that is most natural to you. It's about learning how to be you in a neurotypical world instead of forcing yourself to act neurotypical just to survive. So I'm hoping this is where I find some middle ground for my too muchness. You know the feeling, right? The one where your brain is in full anxiety mode, so it's providing way too much context, and your mouth starts racing to keep up with your brain. You see the light go out of other people's eyes, and they're zoning out, so then you panic, and you say something weird to be funny, just to reel them back in again, so they don't hate you for the mental dump that you just did. Yeah, I'm hoping that if I can embrace my weirdness as a legitimate way of being and not a mistake that I have to fix, then maybe the anxiety will calm down and maybe I'll stop being too much because I'll stop trying to be someone else. I'm still digging into this, so maybe I'll do a whole episode on neuroqueering once I've actually lived it. But for now, my plan is a cocktail of these things. I'm going to try and be vulnerable with my safe people. I'm going to try and accept the multitude and realize my curiosity isn't flakiness, it's a superpower. I'm going to try that identity journal idea. And finally, I might get my blog running as a way to externalize my soul. So I don't know if any of this has been helpful to you. I'm still a ghost in training, and I think I'm starting to see a fate outline in the mirror. And for now, it's kind of enough. As a final note, try to find your neurodivergent community. Find your tribe. Find the people you belong with. I'll be honest, I have a specific source of pain in my life right now that messes with my emotional well-being. I'm up and down mentally all the time, raging one minute, pit of depression the next, and I can't do much about that yet. But over the last year and a half, since AJ moved from work friend to real friend, I've actually been doing really well. I have someone that I can be honest with who kind of gets me. We joke that we have twinsy mind. I see you, AJ. And having that connection is priceless. She's helped me connect with others who have entered my sphere. So one of them has even become like a stabilizing influence in my work life. And it's not about them babysitting me, it's just about having a connection where I can be productive and real without being overly performative. It's a huge part of why AJ and I started doing this. It was for fun, it was our thing. But it was also to try and find others who resonate with us. We wanted to find people who might need a tribe that currently consists of a couple of batty, middle aged chaos goblins. So, if any of this has spoken to you, or if you have your own stories about feeling like a ghost or a kaleidoscope, please reach out. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. You can find the links to all our socials, including our Discord, on the website at momentsofmadness.au. I'll catch you next time, or in the next Moments of Madness episode. Bye, Greer.